Okay, so hello, this is Ray Lutz. I know people are going to be able to view this later in the recording. It is Sunday noon, but it is the first day after the change of the time. So we may have fewer people remember to come on. But I did have a chance to talk to Doug Crago, who was a lead vote center in LA, vote center manager, lead manager in LA, and he said that training was very poor. He didn't really realize he was going to be the lead until the very last minute, and then he talked about the problems there. They had long lines, up to 2 hours delay at the end, and the big thing was syncing the e-poll books. He said that every few minutes, so every like 15 minutes, they would have to resync. Let me continue then, I'll chop that part out. So yeah. So Doug was saying that every 2 to 3 minutes, or no, every 15 minutes, it takes 2 to 3 minutes to resync the e-poll book. And that means during that time, they would either have to stop the line or they would have to just give people provisionals. And so what they were doing is giving people provisionals during that time because they could not look them up at all. So they didn't have in these centers. Again, what they're doing with the centers is, I understand they had something like 900 centers. I thought it was they used to have 4,500, and now they have something around 900. So they basically have gone down by order of 5. So 5 used to be 5, they went into 1. And so they have around 900. So this is why. And from what I could tell, they didn't really have that many machines there either. So they would have this delay of resyncing and then giving them provisionals because otherwise it would hold up the line, but even then they had a 2-hour delay. So I know that there's a whole group of people. I see Sophia has joined us. They have a pretty robust group of people in LA that's going to be going to the Board of Supervisors meeting on Tuesday, and that is an important thing to do, I think, to raise this issue and try to maybe get rid of Dean Logan. Okay, so I think I was hoping that Doug would be online. I see a number there. I don't know who that is, but maybe he'll join us later and he can give us a complete rundown of his experience. Because I talked to him at length. Okay, so let's just cover these other things here. We did go up and look at the random draw, and surprisingly enough, they're doing the draw before the scanning is done. So what they're trying to do is get a jump on the manual tally. And so what they're doing is picking the boxes. So we went over there and we saw in the corner of the room, a whole big bunch of boxes in a big pile, right? And these were all the boxes that were apparently not scanned yet in the corner of the room. And I would say, I totaled it up while we were there, and it looked like all of the boxes were in that room. And then we saw them scanning the day of the random draw. They were still scanning late that afternoon. I understand, I don't know if someone was able to go in, but maybe Sophia or others. I can't remember if we talked to you about whether you went in there or not. But then in San Diego, they were using the blue felt pen to accentuate the vote. And so I did complain about that and in a letter to them. as well as some other things that they should fix up. Okay, so that's what I had. Dale, you had your hand up. Why don't you go ahead and say what you want to say?
Oh, I just wanted to say that you couldn't hear us, number one. And the other thing is,
and I can't hear anything.
Can you hear me now? No, you can't hear. Your speakers are.
Can you?
Your speakers are off.
Why am I not hearing anything?
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
I've got the audio on.
Yeah, I'm talking, but you're not hearing. Okay.
Nothing's coming through for me. Okay, so let me see what the chat room says here. It says, "You're talking, but you are not hearing." That's right. And I can't hear anybody.
I'm the only one
check
talking.
my audio setting.
Ray, can you hear me? This is Susan Pinchon.
Speakers. Let me
Ray?
Just me and.
Oh, there we go. I'm hearing it now. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. All right, so Dale, why don't you back up so I can catch up to where you were?
Okay, 2 things. I was hearing a shutter every so often, like as if your computer is taking screenshots every time it goes out of focus. And then the second question I had was, if I were to record this, would you be able to do everything you wanted to do that you weren't able to do when you were trying to record it?
I've got it recording now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's recording, and I'm going to have to chop out that. I don't know what happened. I changed it over to a different set of speakers. So anyway, I mean, it could be just something simple that's jammed up. Okay, but other than that, so yeah, I couldn't hear you. Sophia says she has no audio. Okay. At all? Okay, so I see Susan's pinch on. That must be you on the line there. Can you say something?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Now I can
Okay.
finally hear.
Yeah, well, I'll put you, I was on mute, but I'll go back on mute. Hi, everybody. Okay, I'll go back on mute.
Okay, so let's see if I can catch up. 977 vote centers would have been empty. No, I don't think that they were empty. But let's put that number down. Harvey said they would have been empty. Why do you say that, Harvey? Why do you think those would be empty? Okay, I see you went off mute, but I'm not hearing you yet.
Right, without the microphone.
Yeah.
How about that?
There you go.
Okay, so the boxes you just pictured there on the blackboard, those boxes were the blue and white boxes that we saw in the storage area, and they go temporarily. And you counted out about 1,000 boxes, which is approximately right. Those were the initial boxes that are used when the ballots come in from the vote centers, and they spend the night there, and then presumably the following day, whichever's come in overnight are unloaded into white boxes, which are then filled to 1,000 ballots inside. Those vote center boxes do not have 1,000 inside. They have whatever happens to have come back from the vote center.
I see.
And I actually got a little more explanation about that the first time I went in that room, and I saw them actually moving the ballots from the blue and white to the white. The boxes we saw actually being tabulated were white boxes, and indeed, they hadn't finished tabulating all the white boxes. I don't think we saw where they had stored the white boxes, but the white box, where they were coming from, going into tabulation, where they were going to, we saw them being loaded onto tables next to each of the 20 huge scanners, of course, one at a time. So they were still definitely tabulating the in-person vote center when we watched after the drawing, the pseudo-random drawing. So We don't know how many boxes they had not tabulated at the time we were watching. That's all I'm saying. But it wasn't that stack over there in that corner.
I know that it was something like 700. It was something like 623 or something like that I remember when they were doing the random draw, and so they pulled 7 coupons, if I remember right. I'd have to review what we did there, but that's then what that means is the 977 of election day ballots. These blue and white were from the voting centers, right? And then those were not from 977 voting centers could be coalesced into 623 boxes. That sounds right, doesn't it? Does that sound right, Harvey? Going from 977, a total number of.
Unmute. Here we go. Yes, yes. Surely the number of blue and white boxes would turn into a much smaller number of white boxes.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and if they were full only, but they certainly wouldn't have been all full. So
at least one of them has to be not full, unless they had exactly. So 623.
We're sure they're aggregating the vote centers together into the batches that were tabulated. Yes.
Okay. All right. So that helps me understand that part. And then yeah. Okay, I'm just looking at the comments there. So they certainly were still scanning, and what Harvey was saying, I agree with. I now that I understand what the blue and white boxes were, I didn't see the storage of the white boxes, but I did see some in the middle of the room that appears that were the ones that they were pulling from, and I didn't actually see the pile of all the white boxes. Okay, so regardless of where they were stored, the point is that they were doing the random draw before they had the scanning done, and they had no reports. Even though I adamantly asked for them, they refused. And this is really bad. I got a comment also from Ron Revest on this, who saw this message on the SWAT State Audit Working Group list, and he said, "Yeah, that seems pretty bad that they're doing that," and it's kind of the I think it doesn't. You have the computer, the statisticians on one side really trying to optimize how the statistics are set up for randomizing, and yet here they're not even done with scanning yet. So it doesn't really matter how random they are if this is how bad that they're doing this in real life. I checked, and the election code says that they're allowed to start the random draw as soon as the polls close, and that needs to be changed. They should not be able to start their random draw until they've completed scanning and have the computer report done. So that's one sort of action item we need to do in terms of legislation here. The guys in San Diego were using the felt tip pen, they said, to cover up any red marking that people had. And what we've discovered, I was able to look through the Dominion setup settings from a card that we got from a Dominion machine showing us all of the settings, and it does have a setting for allowing you to see the red ink. So I think what we need to do is, I know that Rob he went yesterday to the first day of the random, the 1% manual tally in LA to watch it, and it didn't start. I think maybe it didn't start the first day at all, and then he came back the next day. But he did give me some information about that. Let me tell you what he said here. He says this was on Friday. He's waiting all morning. They haven't started the audit yet. It's lunch break. The staff said that they might do it tomorrow as they don't have tally sheets, but I know as soon as I leave, they will start and finish the formality. He said he would stay to the end of the day. On Saturday, so yesterday, he said second day of observation, they took the chair from me saying I have to stand and watch. Then I was told that I can't stand and I must keep walking. Now they have drawn perimeter for me to watch from, and the tally didn't start yesterday and hasn't started yet. They're just separating ballots. Separating ballots. So maybe they're pulling the ballots out and getting them set up so maybe that they can start tallying them. That's the last I heard. So he was there yesterday, Saturday, as well. The key part of the audit is watching what they do when they complete the set. So essentially, they get done tallying. The volunteers or the temporary workers, whatever they are there, they don't have nearly enough in LA to do the job. They finish the tallying. I have no hint of any. I've watched them, and I don't think that these workers that are tallying will ever try to cheat. But when they get done, this is the critical part. What do they do, and how do they handle those numbers? Who compares them with the computer report, and what is done? And that's what I said to Raji. I said, you need to watch what they do when they finish a batch. How do they compare with the batch report? Do they know what the numbers are? Does the guy rescan them? This type of thing. All right. And then in San Diego, they're not going to start their tally until Monday, I believe. And so we need to check that out. So any other reports or anything anybody wants to bring up about what they've seen? Dale, did you get a chance to? Okay, Harvey, go ahead. I see you got the mute off.
Yeah. One thing I'm concerned about is the prevalence of county workers in all the lead positions. Definitely in San Diego, it's systematic, and in Los Angeles, it appears to be the case that they are drawing the election workers from the county whenever possible. And this means that those workers will not be in a good position to call out any problems that they happen to see. It would be bad for their jobs were they to do so. Also, I note that in San Diego, whereas it is possible to observe, it seems to be possible to observe in both counties. In San Diego, it is allowable to place a challenge, what's a legal challenge on a voter eligibility, or presumably, were it to come to that an adjudication. I'll get to that in a second, though. But in Los Angeles, I was told absolutely specifically that you could not challenge anything as an observer. And that seemed rather exceptional and strange practice to me. I was also told that I shouldn't be talking to supervisors or anyone except the escort. There are escorts presumed to be present in both cases. Los Angeles, they won't let you in the door without an escort in Los Angeles. In San Diego, they're a little more lax. They let you into the corridor, and as Ray knows, he can take videos from the corridor from which you can see the full opening process for the vote by mail, cannot see any signature verification, can see adjudication. I want to mention about adjudication that the Dominion system is designed to send a lot of exceptional ballot images to adjudication, where election workers recheck the computer interpretation and then may correct the cast vote record before it goes into the election result. And this practice of painting blue ink, blue felt tip marker over all the votes on any ballot that's deemed to be, well, as Ray was told that it's only ballots that are marked in red ink. I can't believe that because of the large number of them that I saw being marked with blue ink wouldn't correspond to the number of red pens that would have been used in an election. And you could see that it wasn't, they were putting blue ink on ballots that don't have red ink. They had some problem. It was hard to see what the problem was through the glass from a distance. But in any case, the adjudication is supposed to, in Colorado, a significant number of ballots end up in front of adjudicators and a lot of corrections are made. In San Diego, that won't be the case. I know that because they're actually marking blue ink across the voter intent on all the problematic ballots that the extraction people find. And that means they will not go to adjudication because they'll all show 100% pixel density. I believe the overvotes are being pulled out to, or they're being considered as snags. They call them snags, and they would go to I believe they're going to remarking is what they're doing, but that's something that's worth checking in San Diego. In Los Angeles, the system is totally devoid of any means for adjudication. So whatever goes into the scanner comes miraculously out of the scanner as a cast vote record, presumably, and there's no alternative. The only thing that would happen there is a ballot might be outstacked, in which case Ray and I actually saw them attempting to reload their outstacked ballots back in once, and then if they don't go through, then they end up going to remarking. So no chance for adjudication other than whatever. So the machine's doing all of the decisions about whether the ballot is actually interpretable by a machine. That's not a good situation. Better to have human beings doing it. And in San Diego, the human beings are doing it, but they are making the correction by having a supervisor very rapidly mark across the voter intent so that the machine cannot interpret it any other way than fully marked wherever the blue ink is, which they were doing on every mark on every ballot that apparently needed it. So
Harvey, could I ask a question? This is Susan Pinchon. So that they were manually putting, so what you're saying is if the system kickback ballots is not being completely or interpretable by the system, and the mark was a vague mark, that human beings in the San Diego office were marking blue ink to fully mark that oval? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, except they were doing it before the machine saw the ballot. So at the point of opening, the person doing the opening, and there's one person per each, and they are holding by the way, the voter intent, the voter identity on the envelope is kept down. This is a great best practice I've seen here in California, where the two sides of the mail ballot envelope are different colors, and one side has 0 voter identity on it, so that remains up. The operator opens up or pulls the ballot out of the envelope, and with the voter ID right there in that envelope, but on the other side of the envelope, they're looking at all the voter intent to see whether or not the machine's going to have a problem. And if they deem that it is, they raise their hand, and a supervisor comes over and overlays a blue mark that will turn into a black mark on the 1-bit per pixel Dominion system. So, and also the supervisor signs or initials actually the ballot in red ink, which will not show up in the ballot image, but will be on the paper, obviously.
Okay,
so that's what actually happens.
Let me add to this, because I got this summary sheet from the head guy there when I questioned his use of the blue ink. And he said, it says step 5, opening, quality assurance, and boxing. So they can begin opening and removing mail ballots from envelopes 14 days before election day. Openers begin with a tray of up to 200 mail ballot envelopes. Openers remove ballots from envelopes and review both sides for certain issues that may interfere with proper scanning. If found, these ballots will be set aside for further review or action by the quality assurance team. Openers look for torn or damaged ballots, foreign objects like staples and paper clips, and ballots marked with ink that is not black or blue. Pencil is acceptable. Ballot envelopes that contain more than the number of ballot cards allowed in the election or less than the number allowed. ballot envelopes that contain a sample ballot or a copy of the official ballot. All ballots set aside during the opening process will be placed on top of the batch for the quality assurance team. And then the team will review and place these ballots into designated trays for remaking. Remaking of the damaged, torn sample or facsimile ballots. Each remake team consists of 2 workers under the direction of a supervisor. All votes on the original ballot are duplicated to a new official ballot to reflect the intent of the voter. This is done using a ballot marking device, and I've seen them doing that. So they enter it into the ballot marking device. One person does the duplicating, the other verifies the work. They switched and verify remade ballot. They switch and verify.
Ray, what does that mean? It's done on a ballot marking device. They program the ballot marking device to put the right marks on.
That means they vote on the ballot marking device like a voter would vote, you know, at the precinct, where they use the touch screen and they punch in the vote. You know what I'm saying?
In a nutshell, the hand-marked paper ballot turns into a ballot marking device, printed ballot.
Right.
Good God.
With the barcode, the QR code. Okay, so then one person does the duplicating, the other verifies. They switch and verify the remade ballot matches the original. The remade ballot is printed and both workers initial the original ballot log sheet and the remade ballot. Well, that's better than what they used to do. They used to just use whiteout at will all the time with no reporting whatsoever. Now, enhancement of the ballots filled in with ink other than black or blue are enhanced with a designated highlighter pen to reflect the voter's intent. This ensures the voter intent is properly read by the scanning machines. Now, also what they gave me was this voter mail ballot voter adjudication guide. And maybe you can see that. I don't know if it's going to focus. But basically, it gives all these cases of different things that might happen on this sheet and how they would rectify it. Now, I think that what Harvey was saying is actually what was going on here. This was not just darkening up. And why would they give us this? This is what he gave me explaining this. And it wasn't just the red ink. It was trying to adjudicate marking that might be difficult for the machine to interpret. And then maybe it's okay at that time. If it is a weird thing, to go ahead and either remake it or adjudicate it at that point. But one thing they didn't mention was the presence of any personal information. It was not mentioned in here, which of course we want them to pull those aside as well, which they probably would. They just didn't mention that. So that
I actually asked the registrar about that, and he said they are not instructed to divert or remake rubber ballots that have personally identifying information on them. And I'm guessing now that I've seen the adjudication and how little adjudication there is, when I argued to him that obviously it's a best practice to pull those ballots and remake them in order that the ballot images, which will be seen by the adjudicators, won't have personal identification on them. And that didn't seem to be a big argument to him. And now I see why, because the ballots aren't going to adjudication because they're being marked with blue pen that turns into a big black mark that will not lead to adjudication. So the adjudication is taking place by human beings, which is not bad. It's not bad that they're doing that, but they needed to, what should I say? It doesn't solve the problem of identifying the ballot, doesn't cleanse the ballot images of identifying information, which means it'll be very costly for someone to get the ballot images when the county says,
right.
Yeah, we're going to have to look through all millions of them in order to find the identifying marks.
And so, Harvey, why couldn't they do that on the BMD like they're doing the others? If it has a personal identifying mark, to remake it on them, if that's the way they choose to do it, which I wouldn't choose, but to do it on the ballot marking device, just like the others, wouldn't that work?
Well, obviously, the ballot marking device used inside the headquarters is not going to have identifying information in it unless it's really a tragedy going on.
Right.
But So
Right,
yes,
but why
or
couldn't
they
they
could mark
remake?
onto a full face ballot also without the
Right,
identifying mark, or they could actually just put a pressure sensitive label over the identifying mark, which is what I would do instead of whiteout, and then allow the ballot image to be created from that, where a court could actually go back and remove the label. But that would be my preferred solution, would be to
Yeah, they
actually
do
just,
use it. It is whiteout tape that they're using. They don't keep track of it. I wanted to know how many they're doing. It's a pretty good adjudication guide they have here. It's something that I'll probably scan, and it's got to be a pretty high quality scan though, because it's very, very, very
yeah,
small.
I realized they gave me one of those too, but I didn't look at it. But yeah, I'll have to go look at it.
Yeah. Okay. So anything more, Harvey, you wanted to mention?
Nothing at the moment. There's other things I saw.
this is Susan. One more time. I know we're not going to talk about it now, but I just want to mention that in some states that have dominion, such as Michigan, they are deleting the ballot images completely. So they're not even able to do the adjudication that the system is set up to do. And they say it's because it takes too long, that it takes longer on the scanner if they save the images and if they delete them. So we've been studying manuals. I've been looking at all the manuals, and it takes approximately 2 seconds longer per ballot, 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds longer per ballot to save the images as not save them. But I just wanted to mention that because this deletion of ballot images around the country really is a problem, and maybe we could discuss that at some point. Thanks. That's all I wanted to say.
No, that's a good point. And we did try to tell people not to do that. I think it's going to be an ongoing battle over the years to make the point that it would be, it's their responsibility to keep those. We did get it was pretty interesting. I was trying to pull it up here. We might want to just quickly look at it as a group. The card that was gotten from a Dominion machine, and we went through that the other day, and looking over it, and actually John Brake and I spent about an hour and a half looking at it, and so it is something I could just quickly show you here.
Yeah, and I've spent hours looking at that also.
You did.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Ray.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So I'll put it up here and share the screen, and then if any.
The two most worrisome things on there to me were that the system, which Ray already knows this, but the Dominion system and also the ES&S systems actually allow the election, for the person setting up the election, to choose whether they want to save the ballot images or not. And I think that the EAC certification never mentions this possibility that the images can be deleted. And I think that it should be against the law to destroy election records, a clear audit record, which are the ballot images.
Yeah.
And the other disturbing thing on that on that card, I mean, I'm sure there are more than two, but is that it also gives the person setting up the election the ability to delete the audit log. It's called the S log, which I think based on the manual stands for security log, that shows every single event that happened on the individual machine. And that also should not be legal, to have the ability to not save, essentially destroying an audit log. So go ahead, Ray. There are other interesting things on that card.
So basically, I'm going through it here for anybody that has your screen up. But this is actually from the thumb drive off of the Dominion scanner, which would be the polling place scanner. And it just starts up here with the information, and it loads fonts, and then does some testing and so forth, turns things on, the power monitor, temperature monitor, intrusion monitor, and this gets the sizes anywhere from 11 inches long to 22 inches long. And then this was kind of interesting where it said the inserted security token with the serial number blah 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 has been rejected, and then they couldn't log in, and then they got an unauthorized token and so forth, and finally they sort of overrode that and were able to log in anyway. So it looked like the security functionality of this login key was just overridden. Then we had these conditional point things, which were basically setting like settings of the system. It like show write-in precedence on the reports as ballot review enabled, this sort of thing. These were all kind of like the initialized functionality. And then skip over most of that. We had down here transfer result images value 0. Although I do believe they did transfer them. It was hard to tell. And then save images on both cards, value 1, meaning true. We had this one here, drop red color, value 0. So this was an important one to me, is that the essentially, you know, they can turn that on and off. You don't have to not see red. And certainly the scanners that they're using in San Diego, which were the Canon general purpose commercial off-the-shelf scanners, they might be able to drop out red, but generally speaking, no. Those kind of scanners would not be doing that. It's a very kind of unusual thing to do that, but I'm sure the scanners could do it. Then ballot remarking allowed, to let the user go back in and change his ballot. I guess sometimes you wouldn't do that. And encrypt the images was something that was turned off, which we really don't want them encrypted. But just encrypting them doesn't mean that we would never get them. They could encrypt them and still be able to decrypt them on the way in. This was sort of funny. Allow shoe shine mode. I don't know what shoe shine mode is. Maybe that means you want to, you're a salesperson, maybe you have shiny shoes if you're doing a sales demo or something like that. You couldn't figure out what that was.
There is, by the way, a mode in which the ballot images are overwritten with a indicator of what the pixel density detected is next to each mark, which does interfere sometimes with the visibility of the voter intent on the ballot image. And the early ballot images we got out of Colorado were like that. They had a lot of extra designations on them that we didn't want to see. I'm sure the setup for that's in here. Also, Dominion? You'll probably Dominion, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
You'll also going to see in here somewhere, I hope, the lower threshold and the upper threshold for pixel density adjudication, pixel density dependent adjudication, which doesn't seem to report out. In fact, it's a very interesting report to me. I've never seen it, but I've asked Dominion on numerous occasions to show me the report that shows what the settings are for the adjudication thresholds, and they apparently don't have such a report. Now, maybe it is in this report, though it looks like it would be.
So here's where we have the Santa Fe County, the actual election date, 2016, overvote type, number of positions, write-in preference rule false. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe it means that you get the write-in even if you didn't fill in the bubble. Now down here is where they're setting everything to 0, the 0 initial state, where they're setting number of images and number of voters and stuff to 0. And now they're reading here from the configuration. This is like CF1 is like compact flash drive or whatever one. and 2, and then they're 14-inch ballots, and then it's reading in SHA values for languages and so forth. I guess here's the fonts and themes, basically configuring it for those type of ballots. And then finally, we get down to generating the zero tape report and then finishing that. I guess it's completed here. It takes 2 minutes to complete that. Between, well, not quite 2 minutes, I guess 1.5 minutes. And then it goes to the poll is open, and they're in standard voting mode, and then they get the first ballot. So this is at 6:27. They set it up, and at 7:05, I guess they open at 7 in the morning. They get the first ballot, and it finds the markers and determines the ballot ID, and then the type of write-in. It has a voting box, and then end marker detected, and then here, votes determined successfully. Ballot scanned successfully, applying voting rules. So at 7:05:55. So basically, this is 7 o'clock, 5 minutes and 54 seconds. So it went in at 54. A second later, it's finished all of the voting rules. Applying the voting rules is done. So basically 1 second went by. And now we see that it's writing. So there's time elapsed here between about 5 seconds, between 5:55 and 6 minutes, when they finished applying the rules and they started writing the file. Ballot saved successfully, and the ballot was successfully cast and dropped into the box. So it took 1 more second for it to, looks like, as I would write these, writing to file would happen before I started writing. And then at the end here, ballot saved successfully would be at the end of writing to the file. So basically less than a second went by. And then it says the ballot was cast and the ballot went into the box. That's the whole process. And then it goes down here to the end, skipping down. And we see here that we got to the last ballot here being put in, and then at 8 p.m. 06, they put in the security token and the scanner was stopped, and then basically it went into the mode of close the poll. And then we see here that the number of tabulated files, 1, number of raw files, 317, number of images, 317, number of voters, ballots cast, 317, diverted ballots, 39. Not quite sure what it means by being diverted, and oh, maybe those were write-ins. And then basically it went down here to say misread ballots, invalid ballots, fraud ballots, misread, fraud, number scanned 317, number printed nothing because they don't do that, jam ballots, provisional, and so forth. So they have all these counters. Then unit is closed, the print tape, print request received, 5 print jobs, non-cancelable. So that starts at 8 p.m. for 16 minutes and 41 seconds. And you can see it's printing the 5 copies. So it took a number of minutes here before they were done, 24, so about 8 minutes of printing. And then it shut down. Okay, so that is the quick summary. Given that I've already studied it, I could rush through it with you. And again, the key things here that I think were important is that we do see that they it
Ray,
doesn't take.
did you look at the other tab at the bottom? Did you already do that? I was on my phone before. It's the other tab that I find fascinating. That's the one that gives them permission to destroy the audit log and permission to destroy the.
Okay. No, you know what? I didn't even notice that.
Oh, this is the one that's got me going.
So this is
Yeah.
the 3rd of October. When was the other date? November.
Well, this will be a long
So
process.
this was long before that, isn't it?
Yeah,
This is when they were setting it up.
This goes through setting it up, then through the election itself, but let's see, if you can you do a search from where you are? If you do a search for,
Oh yeah, this does even
for save, and then there's another search for transfer where they've saved the audit log, I think it is, but then or the ballot images, but then they choose not to, they can choose not to transfer them, meaning they can choose not to transfer them from the USB back to the election management system. So to me, this is the critical part of this whole.
But that would be after this. So no, that is not nothing after the same, but a lot before. So this one includes.
Right, they decide this when they're setting up the election. They can do the 0, for no, or 1 for yes, and decide whether they're going to follow the rules. They have a choice whether they follow the rules. They have a choice whether they upload whether they save the ballot images. They have a choice whether they save the audit log.
Yeah, so here's where they're saving the ballot images, and it's a big font, so I can't see what it is. Let's lower the size of the font.
I guess it's important to understand this Dominion log is for a precinct scanner, which is not something used in San Diego or in Colorado.
Okay, so that's a good point.
That's interesting.
But what about Michigan? Do you know what they're using in Michigan? Because that's what you're in Michigan, right, Susan?
Yes, they have a variety. They have the precinct scanners, and they have the ImageCast Evolution and the ImageCast X, I believe, and the ImageCast Precinct. I think they have a variety of different ImageCast, the Dominion ImageCast Precinct products.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this is the same. It's the
see back there. See, Ray, you just were on encrypt image, and they checked 0. They did not want to encrypt the images.
Right, they didn't. On the other one was the same. They didn't encrypt the images, and usually I don't see them encrypted. That does take a while. Encrypting the image is not a non-trivial task. It takes a while to do that. So if they were going to, if you say, I want you to save the images and encrypt them, then they might have some problem with that. But they really don't need to encrypt the images, especially in these kind of machines. They really shouldn't need to encrypt anything. Okay, so I don't want to go too far on this one, but that is available, and it was interesting to see, the settings and how the thing runs. And if somebody wants to look at this, I can send it to you. Okay,
it's from New Mexico, by the way. This flash drive was sent to John Brakey by someone in New Mexico.
Right. Okay. All right. So I guess I just wanted to restate that there is this Ballots for Bernie group in LA that is. I noticed Sophia was on the call earlier, and she and some others are really, really active. So if somebody wants to join in with that, then it would be smart, because I know that they're trying to go after Dean Logan in LA for this fiasco that happened there, the debacle in LA. Dale, you're up in the Bay Area. Was any of the people there that are observers, did you see anything of interest?
No. We haven't gone into the Sonoma County. I'm looking at I'm on the team that does the Sonoma County logic and accuracy test.
Okay.
And they failed their logic and accuracy test, and it hasn't been resolved until when we were in there. They supposedly resolved it, but I'm supposed to get a report on Monday on that.
Well, that's pretty bad. When did they do that? Aren't they supposed to do that a few like weeks before the election?
Yeah, the first one that we looked at was on February, I think the 13th. And this is all new for the technician that was running this. They had 1,700 ballots pre-printed as a test from Dominion. And the first snafu was she didn't have the settings right, so she couldn't move the files over to the proper file, a folder for reporting.
Mm-hmm.
When she finally sorted that out, there were supposed to be 1,700 ballots scanned, and the report said that there's 1,800 ballots scanned. And even though there was an over-scanning of ballots, all the reports were 2 or 3 votes short of what they were expected. So it was a mess, and I'm waiting on Monday to find out what the explanation was.
Oh, that's pretty interesting I'm glad you brought that up. It's another thing that we should try to do more of is to be involved with the logic and accuracy testing. I never really thought it was much value because I figured they would, you know, it's sort of the Volkswagen paradigm where everything always looks fine when you're just testing. But that is interesting if they were actually failing that. That sounds interesting. Now, I guess we should mention, because Harvey brought this up, in San Diego, there was another issue, which was it was kind of the same kind of thing when they first started. What was that, Harvey? It was about 30 ballots that were they had it misprogrammed, and they weren't input correctly, right?
There was a training problem there were only 4 vote centers implemented in San Diego, unlike the hundreds in Orange County or Los Angeles. And so they were rather experimental. They only offered the ballot marking device there, quite a bit like Los Angeles. And of course, San Diego was using the precinct polling place. But in the first morning, I was at the center, and they had to stop the voters, halt and restart all the poll book machines. And I believe that the company behind that is called Tanner or Tannoy or something like that. I've actually forgotten the name. Maybe somebody will know which one it is. But in any case, they had vendor representatives there at the vote centers right away. And they had to, they were definitely reconfiguring the poll books about an hour after opening the polls. And up to as many as 60 ballots were given out with the wrong, were actually voted with the wrong style. And so the county had to attempt to replace those. I have not heard the story about the follow-up on that. But some of those voters in the first hour may have gotten the right style. But the reason for that is because in San Diego, they have something like 6-digit precinct numbers or 5-digit precinct numbers. But they also have the sequence numbers, which are used as labels for the precincts. And the election official, the election workers are supposed to obviously enter the one or the other into the poll book, and they're both available on the screen at the same time, and it was crucial to have them enter the correct number in the correct field, but apparently they weren't. And as a result of that, they would end up pulling up the wrong style and handing out there's a credit card thing that activates the BMD, the ballot marking device, so they would be programmed up with the wrong style for the voter. And the voter wouldn't know that unless they were smart enough to recognize it. So obviously some of them recognized the wrong style and complained, and that led to a reworking of the poll books in the early hours of the use of vote centers in San Diego. So it also is true that these 4 centers were only open for 4 days, and there was another center at the election headquarters which was open for, I think, 11 days or a longer period. And they had successfully used the same strategy there, but with different instructions for the poll workers. So my understanding is they They basically cloned what they were using at the main center to these other remote centers a couple hours after opening election day. Sorry, opening the vote centers on the Saturday, I guess it was. They opened.
Right. Yeah, that was
So-
good that you were there, Harvey, to catch that. Otherwise, we would never would have known, but it's something we'll need to follow up on. So that's another kind of, I think, critical issue in San Diego. There was a question here, the significance of outstacked. Essentially, I believe that means that if they detected a write-in, then these ballot machines, not the ones, because again, the machine that we were just looking at that says outstacked, that means that they probably detected a write-in, and so what the machine does is it puts those in a separate compartment, and then when they bring it back, they have all the write-ins separately because they do have to review those by hand.
I suspect that the write-ins were being pulled earlier than that at extraction and being considered as snags and going a different route. But I didn't follow up on that. I believe the outstacking at the those huge tabulator scanners would be for a failure to recognize the registration marks or the ballot style or something.
Yeah, that would
a technical
be
problem because the remedy for that was to put the ballot back into the scanner and attempt to scan it again. So that I'm understanding that was considered a technical failure of the paper to machine interface rather than something intended by the voter.
Yeah, I think there's two. Well, in this thing it says diverted, and so we got two situations. One is the precinct scanner, which has the configuration set up that we just reviewed, and the other one is the central scanners, which are generally general purpose scanners. They're not. Sometimes the ES&S one is custom made by ES&S, even though they did commandeer somebody else's scanner to start with. It's too much of a niche area to actually warrant designing a whole new scanner for it. So they tend to use off-the-shelf scanners. And the ones in LA are really pretty big at 450 ballots sheets per minute. But I would say that even though they may be that fast, they spend a lot of time loading them and a lot of time on breaks while we were there. It seemed like not much scanning was being done. Came in and no one was working, and then they worked for about 5 minutes and they went on another long break. Luckily,
yeah, which is an amazing difference between California and Colorado, because in California, apparently vote by mail is fairly relaxed and they really don't feel any big pressure to get the results out quickly. Whereas in Colorado, all the mail ballots are in at 7 p.m. Almost nothing arrives after that. And actually, the ballots from other counties, envelopes from other counties show up, and then the Yookavas show up later, and some cures. But they are rushing full steam ahead to try to get the election results complete in Colorado, including all the vote by mail. So really different approach in California.
well, it was pretty disappointing for me when I was at election night in San Diego. I made those live stream videos, and they were not scanning yet. They were just bringing stuff in the door, and the news media had already said earlier that night who the winners were for many of the races. And I'm thinking, how can they, this isn't really fair to the voters to have decided what at least we had, when we started voting this year, we had the feeling that there was some people in the contest, because in prior years it was already settled by the time it got to California. So that was kind of better. Okay, so
Another thing,
yeah, go ahead.
I think I'd just like to quickly mention is that I was also a little perturbed by the fact that almost every exception case in California winds up on a supervisor's, that's a staff member's in supervisory position desk, and they make the final decision over how the vote will be counted. Will the voter be eligible or not? They're the final step in the in the challenge process. And this was pretty disturbing for me, since in Colorado we have a more citizen-oriented way of handling those situations. And we're more serious about calling our election workers election judges, although not a lot. We should be a lot more careful about calling them judges and less like employees. But in California, there's no question. They're employees, and they're just intended to do a menial, repetitive job, and nothing special. Any special case goes on to some supervisor who's an employee of the county.
I know that Orange County, it stated in their training video that if there is anything that has to be decided, it goes all the way to the top to, what is it, Neil
Kelly.
Kelly, that's right. Yeah, Neil Kelly says he decides everything. And yeah, I agree. I'm very disappointed in how these things are done here, where they don't have election boards per se. They just have usually an appointed official who's not elected and not really answerable to the public, who does these things. Okay, good. Well, we still have a long way to go.
May I ask a quick question? It's Susan, just quick. Harvey,
Yeah.
do they, or either of you, do they start counting vote by mail before the election? Because in Florida, they
Yeah.
start actually counting them 21 days before the election.
Yeah, they can here.
Colorado
Yeah,
starts 15
That's what I
days
was just
before.
reading. By law, the registrar of voters can begin opening and removing mail ballots from
Right.
envelopes 14 days.
Yeah, Florida used to be 15, now it's
Opening
21.
and removing can be different from actually producing an election result.
But
In
that's when they-
Colorado, you can open before 15 days, and you can start tabulating 15 days before. You're just not allowed to release the result.
That's same in Florida. They can start tabulating now 21 days before, but they're not supposed to release the results.
Mhm.
Right. They're not even supposed to get to the result. They're not supposed to actually sum up the tabulation and make it and look at it. They're supposed to be.
Oh, they can look at it in Florida. They just can't release it. There's no law that says an election administrator can't look at the results. It only says they can't release them,
Okay.
which is terrible.
Yeah. So we're coming up on the election in Florida,
I know.
and we do have Susan Schneider, who I don't see on today, but she has been in the past figuring out what the times are for the audits there, and trying to get volunteers to go into the various districts and at least watch the audit. What county are you in, Susan?
I'm in Volusia County
Oh, okay.
on the East Coast. It's a medium to large size county.
Right. So that is one that I don't think we've had well, maybe you were doing it, but I didn't know what the result was of that. So that'll be good to hear about that. And a lot of times they don't do one. So, if they have a mandated recount, then there is no audit, which is horrible. And
Yeah.
the whole thing about random selecting the races is pretty bad anyway. But, they do something, and something's better than nothing. So we're going to do our best to make sure they're doing them right. There was a few other people who have been very diligent about observing there, but generally speaking, it's been hard to get people to do it.
Could I mention a couple quick things to be on the lookout for in the Florida audit, which happens after certification of the election?
Oh, yeah.
Cannot change the election, but they have a habit of drawing the precincts, the races in the precincts on Friday afternoon, and then saying, so come back Monday morning and we'll draw the ballots. So they have all weekend to make sure that it's going to match. The second thing is the random drawing here. There are absolutely no guidelines. I know, Ray, you encountered that in Palm Beach County when you were there with that great video you did.
Yeah.
But we actually observed one supervisor of elections saying, the race will be this race and the precincts will be these precincts. And we said, well, how did you get those? And she said, oh, we said we were supposed to randomly draw those. And she said, oh, we randomly drew them back in the office.
Yeah. The ones that we like. And that's what they do. And that's what's done in Sacramento too. So yeah, we let's make sure that if we can get in your network there, Susan, if we can get other people to volunteer for that in this next go round. Okay, anything last comments anybody needs to make before we call it a day? Okay. All right, good. Well, thank you everybody for
Thank you,
coming on.
Ray.
I think we accomplished a lot. We'll just keep on going. We do have, again, continuing with the manual 1% tally audits here in California. Some have started, some will start next week, some won't start for quite a while. Orange County has a risk limiting audit they say they're going to be doing, and that's going to be very interesting to see how that turns out. And I do want to try to get, I think we've decoded the Dominion QR code at least for one election, the one in San Francisco, which was interesting because it had ranked choice voting. It is not encrypted. It's just a binary representation that's a little bit hard to understand, but we've decoded it for the most part. And we just want to have some other cases to look at. So if anybody has any cases of Dominion QR codes with an associated hand-marked paper ballot, so we can see what they look like as well, because we do need to know that. And then, you know, they print out what was on. Of course, they have the ballot summary with the QR code, so we can see what the vote is. And so, because we'd like to compare that. But other than that, we're going after the ballot images for some, hopefully a few pilot cases to test our platform and see how it goes. All right, good. Thank you, everybody. And I'll give you the news. Stay on the list, and we'll update there. Okay, bye now.
Appreciate it.
Bye. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
And
Harvey.
Ray, when
Yeah.
watching the random sampling in San Diego, look for what's under the blue to see what actually is being overwritten.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. We'll check that on the 1% manual tally part. Bye-bye.